Time is speeding up. Chaos is shifting into a new level, and we feel the pull to unlock the mysteries of the universe. Timeless spiritual wisdom offers the point of stability to navigate these times and to open our greatest potential. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the fun and knowledge of visionary best-selling authors Shri and Kira as they explore these mysteries and invite your higher love to come forward. And now, here are Shri and Kira.
Namaste and welcome to Explore the Mysteries. I am wisdom teacher Shri Ram Kaa.
And I am Master Lady Kira Ra, and welcome, beloved ones, to a really big experience tonight, because we're tackling what could be two shows. And here it is. What are vibrational levels? You know, everybody's talking about that. And what is ascension? And why are we talking about that together, Shri? I mean, This is a big show, and I just want to connect with everyone out there. Where are we at? Hi.
Well, hey, everybody. We hope you're catching us at AM FM 24/7 or at the official Shri and Kira YouTube channel. And if not there, go to onenesstalkradio.com. We are available to be with you.
We really are. And remember that you can always catch us in real time live every Sunday from noon to 2 Pacific time at onenesstalkradio.com and at the YouTube channel official Shri and Kira. Write that down. Join us live, because if you're listening to this show, you want to catch the rest.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about good vibes versus bad vibes,
well,
and how does that tie into
ascension,
frequency?
Right? Frequency, ascension, and how did we get here? So yeah, Shri, let's just begin at the beginning, right? Because tonight's show, what are vibrational levels? I mean, let's just start there, right?
Yeah, so at the very basic level, I think we can all agree that there are times that you're feeling elevated and happy and buoyant, and then there are times when you're feeling down and depressed. Now, I'm not just talking about the emotions, but they tie in. When we are depressed, angry, or fearful, our entire energy begins to collapse.
Yeah.
And, of course, we feel uncomfortable. And when you walk into a room where people have been in an argument, or
you ever have that moment, right? Where you walk in somewhere and you're like, wow, what just happened? Or why do I feel that weird way? That's what Shri's referring to. Like, most likely there was a discharge of energy into the room, and whether you know it or not, you're actually feeling it.
Well, that's it. It's kind of like walking into a pool.
It really is. Only you're not seeing the water.
It's invisible, but it's felt.
And it's there, and you know it.
So that's kind of the starting point, I think, for all of us, is that we begin to discern that when we are loving, when we're joyful, we are vibrating higher. And actually, that is testable. You actually vibrate higher.
Breathe that in. Just really take a minute. As Shri's sharing, as you're sharing, I'm connecting with all of you. Breathe in. Just really start receiving this information. Just sit back, relax a little more.
One of the things that I think we all can agree on is we prefer to vibrate a little higher. We like
I do.
We like the lightness that comes with loving acceptance.
Yes.
The happiness quotient. I'm happy. I'm a little lighter in my shoes. Life seems to not be as heavy.
And remember, it begins with you.
And
right?
when
It begins with you.
When we first notice that activates our awareness. We begin to go, wait a minute. This is different than before, and I think I prefer it. Therefore, how do I get there again?
Right. And many of us spend years chasing that, how do I get there again? And this is where what are vibrational levels and what is ascension start coming together. Yeah. Because your vibrational level, and my beloved husband, I just have to share it, wisdom teacher Shri Ram Kaa, has been in the entire going into our 19th year of marriage, you have been really studying frequency and vibrational levels. As a matter of fact, on our very first date, those of you that have read Sacred Union, The Journey Home, you know that we got together in Sedona. He took me to see David Hawkins. He took me to meet David Hawkins, and it was amazing. And he was amazing. And so that's how long my husband has been in pursuit of really and seriously looking at this. And this is why when we get to this moment of everything you're sharing, Shri, it's like, okay, so this is where your vibrational level and the ascension energy meet, because what has happened is that we must pay attention to what the ego is trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I wanted to just make sure that we have this common agreement for the conversation, that we tend to notice when we're feeling better Actually, more often than when we notice when we're feeling a little collapsed, because the collapsed energy, the denser energy, is actually more prevalent in density consciousness than the lighter energy, the happier energy.
Right, and this is where the ego also comes in.
Yes.
The reason that we go into this denser mode, often through the energies of doubt, depression, all directed at ourselves, is because we're at a moment where our vibrational frequency, our energy, and Einstein even talked about this and proved this, and we've put out his quotes about this, that in the end, we are this beautiful vibrational frequency that has had to really pull itself in and get denser, 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 so that the senses, meaning that which is a form, can receive the energy of that which you truly are. And so when we start going into this energy, when we start feeling that moment where we're being pulled back, this is where the ego has come forward and said, I'm not sure I trust you yet. Yeah. And this is why, as Shri's sharing, remember, everything begins with you loving you enough to keep walking and to keep saying yes, even when all of this is coming in front of you.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. And one of the things to note here is before we even begin to talk about the ego, we need to talk about being self-aware.
Right?
And this is why these emotional energies are so useful for waking up your consciousness.
Wow.
Each and everybody out there is you have a certain amount of self-awareness. And the more we bump into life, bump into pain and joy, the more our awareness begins to get honed. And I think that in density, meaning mass consciousness, we all start off, being really self-absorbed. And, think about it. You're the little children, it's just my body and my mouth, and I'm touching things, and I'm tasting
toys.
And my toys, and it's me, my. And so that aspect of our orientation actually carries through as we grow up, because what it does is it gives us a personality, an ego shell that we identify with. And even though you grow up from being the infant to the pre-adolescent to the adolescent, etc., there is a piece of your identity which is all about me, taking care of number one, how does it affect me? Am I happy?
What's in it for me?
What's in it for me?
Yeah.
And that me-focused identity is the ego.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's what it is. Now, the good news is that this ego is taking care of you. It's looking out for you to the best of its ability. It's trying to keep you safe. The difficulty is, as we begin to notice vibrational shifts, as we begin to lift, we will reach a point where the ego doesn't like that we're lifting beyond its comfort zone.
And I have to put in the caveat, ... its capacity to trust you. The ego will only lift to the capacity it can trust the you that is moving forward through the body. And what does that really mean? It means that we self-sabotage constantly. Yeah. That this is why we are in cyclical experiences. It's because our vibration reaches a moment where it must, the kind of the fun words that Shri and I use is, you've got to pop or drop. You can't hold a rubber band taut forever. At some point, you got to let go, at which point the rubber band will find a new shape, but it will always be different than it was before. Or if you keep holding it, at some point, it's going to break. And for many, the break is the fall. Yeah. Because you've been holding on so tight that the tension is too big. And this is really why this conversation right now, in this moment, in this experience of time, is so important. Because do you feel the rubber band? Right? You feel the rubber band. And, if you really just right now let go and let yourself have the life you deserve, if you love yourself enough to let go of your judgments, to let go of the planetary thought body, remember that the greatest addiction on this planet is the addiction to the belief systems of everything that you believe is true. And you're so addicted to it. And part of that addiction is pain.
Yes.
We get addicted. As Archangel Zadkiel says, it's the pain of the pain. It's the habit of the pain of the pain. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, read our book, Sacred Union, The Journey Home, where that is all in there. And Sri, it brings us to mass consciousness, because mass consciousness is fear-based.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's important as we begin to get aware of ourself, then we widen our awareness even further, and we look at the environment we find ourselves in, meaning the culture, the context. And remember, we evolve. You start off, your environment's just your family, and then your environment expands to include your school, and then maybe it expands to include a community or a team or a political affiliation, and we keep expanding our context.
Yeah, we do.
And that gives us a backdrop against which we self-identify. We see ourselves acting.
Yeah.
So one thing that doesn't matter whether you believe in an ascension or not, I think everyone starts off preferring happiness.
Yes.
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 And so the ego will get on board and try to make you happy in the ways it knows how, which is usually about money and love and belonging and acquiring possessions and those things. There comes a point where the ego's domination of your reality isn't good enough anymore.
Yeah.
It just doesn't provide you with that deeper peace. This is where the awakening to self-ascension can come forward.
Well, I'm loving that, because this really is where we begin with that peace, love, and joy. And I want to just dive in and remind us all that as we were talking about earlier, in density and all these other experiences that we're having, the root chakra, which is at the base of your spine, your root center, the foundational center of the energy of really being in this world, that energy is craving safety. Yeah. And it is constantly craving safety. And your ego is constantly wrapped around granting safety, because that is the chakra that is the most open to what's going on in this world. To enter into the state of the yoga of self-ascension is to discover that rather than be craving safety, you relax into the peace of trusting that which you are and knowing the divine flow that is coming through you. That's how we transform that first chakra into that stable experience. And just that first step, because we take that piece and then we bring it up to the second chakra as love, we bring it up to the third chakra as joy, then we bring it to the heart, and this whole ascension process opens, and that's the whole other half of the show. But what I want to share with you right now is that this is where we start lifting our vibrational rate. Yeah. The minute we say yes to ourself. Einstein, you cannot solve anything at the level of consciousness that created it, right?
Absolutely. And so the key here is Kira used the word self. Mm-hmm. Now, this is the self with the big S, the true self. The difference here is when we transition out of the me-focused, egoic beliefs that are associated with density consciousness, where we all begin, and we begin to move into more of a spiritual activism. We begin to see groups and understand greater peace and impact. When our context widens, all of a sudden then we begin to notice this yearning I mentioned, this sense of yearning for a deeper peace. And that brings us to understanding our soul.
Healing, right?
Yeah, we begin to see the divine love that is your divine nature kind of seeping through into your density experience. And for most people, that love gets activated more clearly when they're being activistic, meaning trying to take care of somebody out there. Or something out there. It's an extension of love through the concepts of density. That's what activism, spiritual activism is about.
And it's a level up.
It's a level up from density. It is
another level up. It actually does increase your vibration. And remember that with every increase, we also find our next experience of self-limitation.
Yeah. And what's happening here is as we begin to lift into love, every one of us discovers that love has a power and a peace that we can't find in the physical outer world. We find the love and the peace by anchoring and trusting our own heart, which is connected to your soul.
Woo! Wow.
And so when we begin to cultivate that, and for many people this means I'm doing some spiritual practices, I'm meditating, I'm running energy, I'm doing positive declarations, whatever it might be that starts to awaken you to the truth that I am more than this body.
Wow. Now that is the healing moment. To love yourself enough, to trust yourself enough, and to know you are not this body.
Yes.
And you already know this, or you most likely would not have connected with this show. And so how beautiful that we can know this together right here, right now.
Yeah, and that fundamental truth takes a little while to be integrated, because
Yes.
I can look at you right now and I can say to you with 100% certainty, I am not this body.
Ooh, the number one of the four knowns.
Yeah, and I know that to be
Yes,
true.
yes.
However, many people, as they're lifting their vibration, they get to that teeter-totter point of going, well, this body is, you know, and you can't prove it using the mind. You have to know it via consciousness. And this takes trust. It takes trust in your divine nature. But the moment we begin to do that, the moment we begin to trust our soul, we're tapping into the love of the universe.
Wow.
The love that is durable beyond the fear-based physical experience. And this is where the magic of grand reassurance and inspiration and a life that is not dependent upon external stability in order for you to feel safe.
And that's when you're free.
Yes.
That's the moment of freedom. The moment of freedom is when you are so clear on that. And that is the essence of the yoga of self-ascension, to call forward and break free, to have that sacred union of this beautiful, beautiful fluid form that is vibrationally slow enough so that we have senses that can be one with this soul energy. When that consciousness unifies and that first, second, and third chakra stabilize as peace, radiating love, radiating joy, then our ascension portals open, and it's all about the ascended heart and the anchoring of the ascended heart. And I really, really trust that you listen to, and if you didn't, go back and watch Sri and Kira live from today, the same day this show is put on, right here on Sunday, because we're talking about when the empowered queen energy meets the benevolent king. That is the moment of the miracle presence within that ignites that 0 point energy field as the law of instantaneous manifestation. And you are being called to illuminate that divine sacred union within you right now.
Right now.
Right now.
This is the call to a higher order of harmony and
Yes.
balance.
Yes.
And this harmony and balance means I accept all of me. I love all of me. I love my masculine qualities. I love my feminine qualities. I love the fact that my body is faithfully taking me through life. And I love that I can be aware of what's going on.
That's where it all begins, does it not? When our eyes open to the awareness, to the greater experience before us, when we let down this sense of knowing it all and experience the blessing of receiving it all, being available to it all, that's when we meet each other in the field of incredible creation.
Absolutely. I love that. The field of incredible creation.
Yeah, right?
Now, this is reminiscent of the poetry of Rumi.
Yes.
So just to recap a little bit, no matter who you are, what you believe, what's going on, everyone can agree that happiness feels better than depression and anger.
I like that one. That's a unifying check mark.
You know, and that we all get a sense of upliftment. Now, how we find our upliftment is part of the journey, whether it's through a social group, a religious group, whatever it might be. However, what we will discover along the way is that we have a refinement in our awareness.
Yes.
And that refinement is cultivating your spiritual palate. Even the atheist is going to say, no, I can sense that some energies are finer and more beautiful than other. And take for example, when you gaze at a sunset, when you gaze out at a beautiful flower, when you breathe deeply
every day
and just move into the present moment and go, wow.
Wow.
At that moment, you are vibrating so much closer to the energy of love than fear. And that is the gateway to your self-ascension process.
Absolutely. And we have so much more to share about this. So take in a deep breath, grab a cup of coffee. We're going to be right back.
To the Self-Ascension Classroom, affordable and beautiful home study for your mystical journey. Imagine the gift of studying everything that you've ever wanted at home and on your time. Yes, it is possible, and there is so much to choose from as you dive into your home study experience. Remember that with every moment you spend studying this gift, you ignite your divinity. Imagine the mysteries of the Tohil and the crystalline clarity and radiant abundance of Vesa, a mastery balancing technique and certification process, and then cosmic life regression. Travel the universe and remember. Allow yourself the gift of navigating the inner matrix. This beautiful Ascended Mastery program of the Violet Flame will take you to places you may not have dared to dream to go, and then you will rediscover the true gift of your divine nature. Yes, the time is now to study the ancient mysteries, and it's so easy to begin. Discover the Self-Ascension Classroom only at ShriandKira.com. That's ShriandKira.com. Namaste.
And now, here are Shri and Kira.
Welcome back. We are glad to be with you.
Right here, right now, I'm exploring the mysteries. Of course, my beloved husband, wisdom teacher Sri Ram Kaa. I am Master Lady Kira Ra, and I really hope you are with us because we're going further. What are vibrational levels? What is ascension, and how are these two coming together? And I guess really, Sri, why would it matter? Let's start there, right? Let's pick it up from the first half and keep going.
Well, I'll tell you what, it matters because the state of our shared experience here on Earth is directly influenced by the vibrational average or the quality of experience here. You know, it's not everyday language to talk about vibrational levels and
unless you live at Tosa Blue Mountain.
True. And yet, one of the things, Kira mentioned David Hawkins in the first half of the show. And I want to mention a couple things about his work because what he brought forward was a way of actually measuring vibrational levels as applies to the waking up or the path of enlightenment.
Consciousness.
Which is consciousness in its essence. And what his work, and he wrote a dozen books on this, and they have been back-checked and calibrated and lots of discussion groups out there. The gift he brought forward is he said, hey, we can actually scientifically measure your level of consciousness. Whereas prior to this time, it was just a poetical conversation.
It was too mystical, right? It would be considered woo-woo. And that's one of the things I love that Hawkins did, was he took levels of consciousness and said, look, this is not woo-woo, this is real. And I love that it came from a psychiatrist who had spent a lot of time in some of the really intense hospitals with psychiatric patients, and was one of the first people who realized, wait a minute, a lot of these people, not all, but many of these people are having spiritual conditions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it became one of these things of, well, let's take a look at the great saints. Let's look at the, everything from Mahatma Gandhi to Mother Teresa to Sai Baba, etc. All of these prophets and saints, Christ and Muhammad, to be able to, can we calibrate their level of consciousness to understand the evolutionary process of consciousness?
Breathe that in. Can we calibrate this so that we might understand? And those of you that join us every Monday night on Monday Magic, you know that the word understand is code for relax the left brain. Yeah. And that's really, I think, the essence of the work, that he really offered a platform, because you've taken it to a whole other level.
Well, there's more to share here for sure.
Oh, yeah.
But one thing else I want to mention on David Hawkins' work is that one of his driving motives was to discern the difference between truth and falsehood. And this is powerful, because what he has, in his research, and this is a very intelligent, studied individual, he was basically saying that humankind, 80% of humankind cannot discern the difference between what is life affirming versus what is life defeating.
Now let's just stop and really talk about what that means. Talk about that. So say that again. What percentage?
80% of humanity can't tell the difference between that which is lifting you and offering nourishment, health, and upliftment from that which is actually bad for you and taking you down into disease, fear, and separation.
So that's what brings into me like the why question, and where immediately you see the consciousness overlay.
Yeah, exactly. And so according to his calculations, if more than 2/3 of the globe can't tell the difference, what he's talking about is the level of consciousness is at what he would call a lower state, filled with the energies of things like grief and apathy and pride and anger, and that these forces are polarized where to such a degree that they become very superstitious, become easily influenced by people who have a charismatic tone. And that so 80% of humanity has difficulty discerning the difference between a truth and a falsehood because they don't have an inner compass.
Now,
That's the bottom line.
Right, but I've got to jump in here, because it is that 80% that are unaware of how to command that inner compass. It's not that they don't have it. They've just let it go away because they're at a level of
disconnected from it.
They're at a level of consciousness that doesn't see it. It so explains the current moment and why consciousness is the conversation, why consciousness is the moment at hand, why if there is a war, it's a war on our consciousness, because consider that keeping people in general at a lower level of consciousness makes them much easier to control, since they can't determine whether it's real or not. They can't determine whether it's good for them or not.
Yes.
If your level of empowerment, if your level of divine connection is so muddied, because that's really what that is, that's lack of clarity, right? Then immediately when you see that much energy in that conflict, it's fear.
It is absolutely fear.
This is the self-sabotage that comes from fear.
Now, fear is a kind of a funny one, because
I love that.
Fear can infiltrate many levels of consciousness.
And does. And
how do I know that? Because I've seen it, felt it.
We've all been there. You have to grow through it. Remember, no one's immune. Every single one of us walks the same experience. It's the way we walk it that is our unique moment of being.
So if we take a look at, people who lifted humanity's consciousness, and in the modern era, you can look at like Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. Both were practitioners of nonviolent expression. Yeah. How do we raise awareness of the population, and open their hearts without going to war?
Yeah.
And they were beautiful representatives of that energy. And what happened, as we get a little distance now, is take a look at what happened in the United States and Martin Luther King in the 60s and raising awareness to the imbalance and injustice of the way the African Americans were treated versus the white dominant race. And to be able to say, well, we believe all men are created equal, well, let's go there, rather than just say all people in my club are created equal. and so it was a very interesting time in America because consciousness was rising to a place. Activism was very strong. People were moving more into an optimistic place, in a place where we can make change. Yeah. And this, I'm going to show you Hawkins' scale in a minute, and we could talk about that. But what was happening at that time was an upliftment in the general level of consciousness in density.
Right.
It was due to the efficacy of the activism at that time, because that activism was more powerful than other forms of activism because it was non-violent. It had more love in it.
Now, breathe that in, because that was also the first moment of choice. And I really would be remiss if I don't bring us to this moment right now because of that.
Yeah.
Remember that our ascension process, the way that we are constantly moving through all of this energy, the way that we evolve into our conscious states and to our higher consciousness frequencies is through a cycle. And it's a spiral. And that's why the spiral is so popular, because you're never out of the spiral. You're either spiraling up, spiraling down, or in a lateral spin. But what moves the spiral are the energies of awareness, experience, and choice. And this is where the free will conversation comes in as well, because who is making the choice is what it essentially comes down to. And what you were just describing is that first moment of true choice, and how we break free, how we shift the level of consciousness that created that, how we ignite our consciousness and move to a higher level is to make a conscious choice rather than just be ruled by repetitive choices that we're not even aware we're making. We're moving through awareness, experience, choice so quickly.
Unconsciously.
That until we can arise through that mass consciousness, until we can see the density for what it is. On the first part of the show, one of the gifts that we all talked to, the agreement we all came to, was actually the first of the four knowns, which is I am not my body.
Yes.
That the body is a divine, beautiful, co-creative experience. It is not that which you are. And it is the energy that inhabits our body and the choices at hand that are making a difference. And I with all my heart and soul, please go to WWA Global, WWAGLOBAL.com and start learning about what's happening, because the choice that we are in right now, we are right now in this month, this is our last show in choice energy. What is the choice you are making, and are you consciously making it or not? And the reason that the WWA Global Summit was launched, that all this energy has been put into momentum, November 21 through, we're going into the March equinox, 2021, March 21, 2021. This is a moment where this is more than just your own choice. This is a moment where the escalation of consciousness is the choice of the awake to be able to hold the balance, where the beautiful empowered queen stands next to the benevolent king, and that unified presence of oneness comes forward. That's the shout out of light that says consciousness is ready to expand more, that we are breaking the cycle of self-sabotage as a species. Remember, these cycles don't just affect the you. We are interconnected. They affect the all.
Absolutely, absolutely. And hang on a second, I want to see if...
What do you look? Let me help.
I don't see the victim triangle there. I want to talk about...
It was there, right there. Right there. There we go.
Okay.
All right.
All right. I want to talk about this one. For those of you on camera, you'll see it on screen. And for
we
the
just
rest
put
of you,
up what we call the victim triangle.
This is just a powerful model. And for those of you listening, I'm going to explain it very briefly. The energy of victimhood is trained and it's almost cellular.
Now, for those of you at home that don't have the video, draw a triangle in your mind or draw it on a piece of paper. And this victim that Sri just talked about, put it on one of the points, because that's why we call this the victim triangle.
Yeah, and the victim is the most common entry point because it is a place of feeling hurt or powerless, traumatized, and which prevails at so many levels and
loves the ego.
Totally.
The victim, believe it or not, guys, victims are very me. Lots of partners in pain around victims. Lots of buy-in that it's not there's no responsibility.
And so the victim triangle, it has two other points. So the victim, the abuser, and the rescuer.
So those three triangle points right now, write it down. Victim, abuser, rescuer. It doesn't matter where you put them, just put them.
And what happens is that as you kind of consider this, it's one energy with three faces. So the victim face is very common. However, a victim can't exist unless there's somebody that's abusing or violating its boundaries, right?
Right.
And so the victim and the abuser are like locked into a dance. They are dance partners. And then the only way that density knows how to interrupt that Velcro dance partnership is dun, da, 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 here comes the rescuer.
Well, and Sri, I've got to jump in here because I want to share, and we'll come back to this in just a minute, but this is the single most important moment when it comes to escalating consciousness, because this is where the partners in pain come in. In that victim, rescuer, abuser, one cannot exist without the other. This is where that whole concept of codependency comes in. You cannot, and until you ascend through that, which is the next layer of teaching, we're going to teach you about this, but until you ascend through that, everything you do is coming from the level of victim consciousness. Thereby, your ego feels very satisfied. Thereby, you will have others around you that will support your matter of opinion. Thereby, you will have lots and lots of repeat cycles. This is how you know. How you know that you're stuck in victim consciousness is that your same cycles keep repeating. And when you can get nakedly honest and look at those cycles and realize that the only common thread is you, that's when you start breaking free from the victim triangle and you come all the way back into that ascended triangle. And we just put that graphic up again. So you know where you put victim, abuser, rescuer. Well, you ascend through them, because remember, everybody goes through it. You ascend through them into the teacher, the healer, and the mentor. And it doesn't matter where you put those, because all these energies play together.
So the teacher, the mentor, and the healer are one energy that is a love-based energy that has gathered wisdom, has lifted to a higher vibration, and this ascended energy has three faces: the teacher, the mentor, the healer. Versus the denser energy, which is victim, abuser, rescuer. Now, one of the key differences between what we would call the ascended healer triangle versus the victim triangle.
Just the ascension triangle, just the energy of the ascended presence.
The critical difference is the dissolution of the ego's positionality. The ego is very much aligned with your inner child and your body, and it's so if anybody's ever hurt you, or in any way, it's easy to move into I'm not good enough, or they did something wrong, and you get into that hurtful kind of place where, like I say, the abuser and the victim get Velcroed together, and then waiting for a rescuer to come in at the same level of the problem, provide a temporary feel-good experience, but it doesn't resolve anything. And as Kira pointed out, it'll repeat and it'll repeat. It's a cycle.
Exactly.
And that cycle is visible throughout your families and other social groups. So what happens is when we finally lift into a little more of a love-based reality, that we begin to connect with our heart and our soul, we then have a foundation that is vibrationally higher than the victim energy.
Wow, right?
Your soul is not a victim of anything, right? Your soul is a master. Your soul is masterful.
Yes.
It is only the egoic faces that are victimy. And so consider how this goes.
And self-perpetuating.
And over and over.
That's the self-perpetuation. That's the self-sabotage.
Because the ego, which is your personality self, loves repetition. It gets its juice from kind of going, oh, I know where we're going.
Well, that's why it loves doubt. Because anytime it sees you growing, have you ever noticed that you've been in that flow? Things are going great. Everything's coming on board. Things are just flowing. And then somewhere along the line, that fabulous little piece of self-sabotage, the ego is going, I'm not sure I feel good about this. You're not giving me enough attention. Attention, right? It's just your ego throwing a tantrum. And so what if in that moment you could offer your ego even greater reassurance that you are here, that you have got this? Because the ego is accustomed to making all of your choices.
Yes.
All of them. And so when you are making your choices from your highest inspiration, at first it feels very challenging. And the irony is that as you're expanding, you can actually bring doubt forward. That's when the moment of deeper trust really comes forward. And this is where a lot of people derail. Mm-hmm. A lot of people derail here because they start blaming that which was actually increasing the flow, and then they wonder why they're stuck in another repetition while the ego's going, oh, I feel so much better here. I know this loop. And that is really the victim energy, because let us not forget that with the victim energy, with victim, rescuer, abuser, first, there is the energy of the victim, is usually I don't deserve, that shows up for the abuser who absolutely is in their abuse cycle, and we can be the same person, but it enters the rescuer. And frequently in that abuse cycle, the rescuer is also the abuser, or the rescuer is also the victim. And they're trying to make amends, and then things get good, and then it loops again, and things get good, and it loops again, and things get good, and it loops again. If you are tired of that circle, then the first thing you need to look at is you in the mirror, and get nakedly honest with you and know that everything in your life, the common thread is you. You're the common thread. And the minute you know that, you can break free.
Well, and here's the thing. You got to have a little mercy on yourself. The common thread is you, but it's not your higher self.
Right, but when you know it's you've opened up awareness.
Exactly. You open the awareness to have discernment. And we're gonna give you a couple of tips on how to work through that. The key here is to recognize that all of the problems of our shared experience. When I say problems, I'm referring to things that cause pain, conflict, and disharmony.
All the co-creations that bring us those experiences.
Those experiences are all generated and supported by a level of consciousness that is highly immersed in the ego. And the ego believes in separation, lack, fear, and competition.
Polarity. This is where all of those energies come from. And that's what the ego is meant to do.
Well, yes, it's meant to carry you through the growth phases of evolutionary process.
Notice your words, though, carry you through. It's, in other words, until you are ready to say yes to the divine within is hanging out, eating popcorn, watching the show. Because your divine nature has infinite patience because of your infinite, limitless nature. So this is where the power of commanding our own choices becomes even more profound.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the yoga of self-ascension has brought forward some clear delineations in consciousness that we want to share with you.
They really help, I think what it does is it helps the mind relax enough to actually lift into these states of consciousness.
And here's the key. Everything that we're sharing with you will come naturally to your world of experience.
Absolutely.
As you relax into your own divine nature and let go of the need to control and manage and run with the ego's game.
Right.
It takes a little practice and steadfast commitment. However, let's take a look at this. Up on screen right now is the pyramid of spiritual awakening.
And for those of you that are listening, it's a pyramid. Draw another pyramid and then slice it into 4 sections. So it's got a bottom, 2 middles, and a top.
And that base, the biggest section is density consciousness. Now, we refer to that as mass consciousness. Also, density consciousness is a better descriptor because that vibrationally, it's just simply more dense. And your experience as a human being is going to be very much with the preoccupations of fear and anxiety, safety, power, sexual issues, everything that's me focused. What about me?
Right.
And density consciousness is this huge kind of zone of interaction where we're dancing with these kinds of issues.
And we're all born into it. That is the choice or the fall, is to come into density consciousness and really pay attention as we ascend through it. And, the one thing I do want to share about density consciousness before we move into the next layer, which is that spiritual activism, is that in density consciousness right now, the prevailing energy for many years, and we call that the planetary thought body. And it goes back to what we were talking about on the first half of the show today. And what we were talking about in the first half of the show, we opened up with, you ever walk into that room? Yes. You're feeling great, and you walk into a room, there could be nobody there, and you're like, whoa, what just happened in here?
Kind of tacky in here.
Right? And some of you may actually feel it or sense it. That's the moment where your awareness is saying, pay attention. There are multiple experiences happening. And so that icky sticky is a moment where the planetary thought body is really calling you, because you don't feel it if it's vibrating in the joy or the higher space, because if it's vibrating at your frequency or higher, you'll be very comfortable with it. But when it's lower than your frequency and you literally bang into it, you feel it.
It's an abrasive, incongruent energy. It doesn't match up with who you are.
Sometimes you might have free-floating anxiety, and you might wonder why. That's because you're tapping into the planetary thought body. And the planetary thought body is made up of all that sloughed off energy, all of those random thoughts. Anytime we are not saying yes to the master within, then the master without is doing everything it can to influence everything you are. And so really, really breathe that in right now, because what's happened is that we have been in this density consciousness. And when Sri and I first put this out many, many years ago, one of the things we shared was that humanity was at that moment, back in 2006, I believe, we started talking about how humanity had anchored in the second layer of this pyramid, and that this anchoring stood to be the most dangerous level ever. And certainly all these years later has panned out to be true.
Yeah. The second layer, we call it spiritual activism. And the reason that we call it that is that, number one, people are lifting out of the narcissistic focus of density into more of an us, a more inclusive focus.
So it's a big lift.
It's a
big lift to go from me to we.
Yeah, it is. And there's more heart involved.
More consciousness.
However, what happens in spiritual activism is the ego is still there. It's just become a little more kind.
It has better words.
It's evolved a bit. And so it becomes an us versus them kind of orientation.
Which is polarizing.
It's very polarizing. However, the us is bigger than the me. And so on the one hand, there's more expression of heart and inclusiveness, but it has to be my team, my group versus something else.
And this is why in that us versus the me, this is why anger comes in.
Yes.
Remember we talked about that planetary thought body earlier having fear. Now it has anger. And that anger has come from all the activism.
And the activism that is not grounded in a universal heart energy will always create more of the polarity and more potential for fear to express. Because what happens when you have polarity? Both sides want to keep existing. And if one side,
and they lock down.
Yeah, if one position feels threatened by the other's positionality, then it evokes all of those safety issues and all of the fear, and the anger comes forward saying, how dare you?
And then here's where we come. And this is what's so powerful. And let's put the pyramid, forgive me guys, I have the hiccups and I have no idea why. So let's put the pyramid of spiritual ascension back up here right now. Because of the spiritual activism, because that emotional joy, that sense of righteousness has come forward, what's happening with spiritual activism is that it has brought in the anger energy to the point where the fear in the density is now blending with the anger in the spiritual activism, kind of like the middle of the strata, and birthing hate inside of spiritual activism. Now, the good news about that is, going back to the first part of the show where we mentioned, it's going to force you to pop or drop. You're either going to pop up through it into Ascension Awareness, or you're going to drop back into density consciousness, or you're going to stay right there in that anger, fear, and hate. And how many people are bonding through that and repeat another cycle. And that's where humanity's at as a whole as well.
Right. You're always going to cycle. The question is, what's the content of your cycle? And how is that going to go?
And are you cycling up, down, or around?
Exactly. So most people that will, over time, they're going to evolve out of the me focus of density and going to start to align with more of an us focus of spiritual activism.
Right.
The real threshold or tipping point is the area that we call Ascension Awareness. And this is moving up a layer on the pyramid.
So we're at the number 3 of the 4 slices of the pyramid.
And so it's a little smaller visually. And truthfully, there's fewer people that are anchored at this level of consciousness.
Very true.
Because this is the level of consciousness that involves a sense of being in the world but not of the world, a greater peace and a spiritual joy.
Well, and that peace means that we have anchored our first chakra. You're unable to go to Ascension Awareness unless you have really anchored your first chakra in the peace of your divine trust.
You're identifying with your essential being, which we refer to as the soul, that love-based being, and that you trust the divine as expressing through you. So as we consider this as a natural progression for people who are saying, I choose to evolve, I choose to become that which I'm capable of being.
Yeah.
And that there comes a point where we recognize I am a spiritual being having a human experience.
Right.
And when we lift to that recognition, when our emotions flare, when our victim energy starts running, we can watch it and see it without drowning in it.
That's the key.
We don't identify with the victim. We see it. Oh, it's a pattern that's running.
Oh, look at that. Versus
take a breath
I am that.
and let's interrupt the pattern.
Right.
Versus it's a pattern that's running and I'm a victim of my pattern.
Which is the victim energy, which is just so beautiful. And I want to pop this up as a minute. Those of you that are watching the video, those of you that are not, what I just put on the screen is everything you're talking about right now is saying, move up in consciousness. What you're looking at right now is a series of angels all lifting up one from the other. And at the very bottom of the graphic is the third dimension. And that it is your angelic presence. It is that moment of awareness where you begin to step through that spiritual activism. Because remember, that's actually the gateway, and do exactly what you were just talking about. That's when we love ourselves enough to lift into that 5th dimension. And you see right there, that's when we become the witnesser of our 3rd dimensional presence. And this is that gift, when we can become the witnesser. And then the challenge, it's a simultaneous gift and challenge. The gift is that you love yourself enough to witness it without diving or being it. And the key is, can you keep loving yourself enough not to judge yourself through it?
These are the growth opportunities.
Right.
One of the things that I trust that you could accept is that you're not going to get it perfect every day.
Nor do you have to.
And we're going to relax our whole idea of perfection.
Right.
Because in my way of looking at myself, if I'm aware, it's good.
Because that's where ascension begins. What is ascension? It is the conscious awareness, experience, and choice that comes from the higher witnessing of that which is expressing in complete unification. That is the yoga of self-ascension. The complete unification, the divine acceptance without limitation. And where does that limitation come from? Our own self-sabotaging experience. Hence, back to the very beginning of the show.
Absolutely.
Right?
We limit ourselves through fear and doubt.
Yep.
We ascend through love and trust.
And we're ascending from the moment we're born.
And so I want to kind of bring this, tidy this up a little bit, because we talked about David Hawkins, we talked about levels of consciousness, the pyramid of spiritual awakening. Right. Let's bring them together for a brief exploration. So what I have on screen for those of you that are listening is the Pyramid of Spiritual Awakening has the density, the activism, ascension awareness, and ascension consciousness.
Now look on the left side. Those are those levels that were just in the other model.
Right. Hawkins' levels of consciousness, which he has back-checked through thousands of people, has put numbers on things. But I want to call your attention to the qualities that these numbers represent.
Yeah, breathe this in.
remember we mentioned earlier that according to David Hawkins, 80% of humanity really has trouble telling the difference between truth and falsehood, and will do self-defeating behaviors. Well, these are the folks that are vibrating under 200 on his scale. And as we look at the qualities under 200, let me offer you some of these words: shame, guilt, apathy, grief, fear, desire, anger, and pride. Now, if you look at any fairy tale or movie or people in your life that have acted from great pride or great desire, oftentimes they weren't really thinking of other people, let alone their own best interest.
And I want you to notice there's like a little red line on the chart here between 175 and 200, between the words pride and courage. And that's because on that pyramid of spiritual awakening, remember that every one of those experiences, we have the 4 sections, the 4 layers of the pyramid. There's actually 3 energies. So within each of those 4, there's 3 energies. And what under this red line is showing you is really up to the middle of density consciousness, saying that this is when we are still self-inhibiting through our density consciousness. It is absolute lack of awareness.
Absolutely.
And notice that pride is the top. It's the best you can get in the world of deepest density.
Yes. And what happens as we begin to lift, we start invoking courage, trust, optimism, and here's the magic word, forgiveness.
And notice forgiveness brings us to the next threshold, because those 4 energies, and remember, it first starts with our courage, then our trust, because then that ignites our optimism, then we come to that forgiveness. That's when we're actually evolving up from the me and start discovering the we, and that's why the forgiveness is so important.
When we're able to let go of a belief in some limitation and lack, where we're able to forgive, we actually open up to a greater understanding of the nature of love and the world, and that brings us up fully into spiritual activism, which is an improvement on density. It's an expansion. And according to David Hawkins' work, we're in the 400s now.
And here's what's interesting. Unlike the density consciousness, where we went from like 20 to 350, spiritual activism is the only level that has one level of consciousness, and it is the understanding, which is the ever-refining left brain consciousness, letting go of the ego evermore. It's that actually gets us through the spiritual activism and brings us to the next layer.
And the understanding level, or in Hawkins' scale, the 400s, are the levels where there are statesmen and great authors and,
that's why we're stuck there.
Abstractions.
Exactly. This is where, this is really why the world is stuck here. And spiritual activism is dangerous because it's my we. It's not the collective we. Yet, it is, again, the only level with one experience, and it is that understanding that finally pops us into the Ascension Awareness.
Now, Ascension Awareness is where we start. Our primary foundation is love.
Yeah.
And when we start working with the energies of love, of gratitude, and experiencing true joy, we're now in a whole new reality where we begin to see the beauty of the world. We begin to see a harmony behind the apparent polarity.
Well, and it's a stabilization, because like spiritual activism, it's also the only other area that has one, it's the 500s.
Yes.
Ascension Awareness is navigating the 500s. And when we pop through that into full ascension consciousness, the 600s begin, and it goes way above that. Shri and I have charted levels of consciousness that are mind-boggling. And I do want to remind everybody that, Hawkins' scale is just arbitrary numbers. It's just a way of putting this all together. But you are not arbitrary. Your life is not arbitrary. What is vibration? It is the amount of love you are willing to not only receive, it is the amount of love you are willing to command. That through your empowered presence, through the gift of the divine yoga of self-ascension, you are able to say yes to the full consciousness that you are, thereby igniting a constant stream of creation energy, moving into the field of 0-point creation and being the law of instantaneous manifestation. Ascension is knowing that.
Absolutely. Well said. And I want to underscore something. The good news is that David Hawkins offered something that we can use to discuss. The challenge is it's going to feed the brain to judge and have hierarchy.
It might.
It can. And what Kira's just said is ultimately it comes down to you and your choice to accept and be the greatest amount of love, wisdom, joy, and light that you can radiate, because it is self-fulfilling and actualizing.
Beautifully said, Shri. And so, beloved angels, hey, get over to ShriandKira.com. Check it all out. There's so much happening, tons of free stuff. Expand your consciousness. Find out about the yoga of self-ascension. And may your heart know how much we love you. Many, many blessings.
Thank you for joining us at Shri and Kira Live. To have your questions answered, send us an email to guest@ShriandKiraRadio.com and check out more information at ShriandKira.com. See you next week. Namaste.